The thing about living your whole life in a tin can is you stop noticing the hum. It's always there, the ventilation cycling, the spin servos keeping us pinned to the deck plates, the water pumps pushing recycled piss through filters older than I am. After a while it becomes like your own heartbeat. You only notice when it stops. Mine stopped 3 days ago. Not my heart. The hum. Section C's primary air handler finally seized up, and now there's this silence in the aft quarters that makes my teeth ache. 47 people breathing in a dead corridor, waiting for engineering to machine a replacement bearing from stock we don't have, and all you can hear is the breathing itself. Wet and rhythmic, and too many lungs pulling from the same stale pocket of air. I'm sitting in what used to be the commissary writing this on the back of inventory printouts from 2089. We stopped printing new ones when the paper ran out. That was 6 years ago, when I was 19. Old enough to understand what it meant when Supply Chief Ramos started writing ration counts in the margins of decade-old documents, his handwriting getting smaller and smaller to fit between the lines. My name is Jonas. I was born on Vault-Tec orbital platform Gamma 5 inches 2084, which makes me 25 years old and one of the youngest people still breathing up here. There used to be others my age, 16 of us total, the last generation born in 0G during the desperate climb to orbit while the world ended below. Now there's 4. Sarah died in the algae tank accident when we were 14. Marcus went out the airlock during a repair shift. Safety tether frayed through from repeated use, and nobody noticed until he was already drifting. Lisa and her brother Thomas stopped coming to meals 2 years back, locked themselves in their quarters, and wouldn't answer when anyone knocked. When we finally forced the door, they were curled together in the narrow bunk, holding hands, pills scattered on the floor from the medical locker they'd broken into. That left me and David and Yuki and Chen, 4 20-somethings who've never felt real gravity, never breathed air that didn't taste like copper and recycled sweat, never seen Earth as anything but a slow brown sphere turning beneath our feet. We don't talk about going down anymore. The adults used to talk about it constantly when I was small. I remember sitting in the common area during community meetings, listening to the original crew, the ones who remembered the surface, who'd trained at Vault-Tec facilities in California and Massachusetts and been in orbit when the missiles launched. I remember them making plans, discussing descent trajectories and landing zones, and how they'd retrofit the emergency return vehicle for atmospheric entry. They had maps spread across the table, pre-war satellite images showing regions that might have survived with minimal damage. Might have. That was always the word. Might. Chief Dalton ran those meetings. She'd been the platform commander, a former Air Force officer who still kept her silver hair cut military short, even as it thinned and grayed. She spoke with absolute confidence about timelines and mission parameters, like we were still following some grand Vault-Tec protocol instead of just trying not to suffocate. We maintain the station, she'd say, every single meeting. We preserve our population. We wait for radiation levels to drop to acceptable thresholds, and then we execute a controlled return to the surface. That's the mission. That's what we're here for. I was maybe 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor because there weren't enough chairs, and I believed her completely. We all did. The mission was real. The return was inevitable. We just had to wait. Chief Dalton died when I was 16. Brain aneurysm, the medic said, though we all knew it was just age and stress and the slow degradation that happened to everyone up here. Something about the radiation exposure, the recycled everything, the way our bones didn't quite form right in the weak spin gravity. She went to sleep one night and didn't wake up, and when they found her in the morning she still had that same expression she always wore: firm, certain, in control. We stopped having community meetings after that. The platform isn't what you'd imagine if you've only read about space stations in old pre-war magazines. It's not sleek or gleaming. It's a cluster of cylindrical modules connected by flex tubes and reinforced junctions, the whole thing rotating around a central axis like a wheel with spokes. The rotation gives us maybe 0.4 G. Enough that things fall instead of float, but not enough that you feel properly heavy. Everything takes on this dreamy quality, like you're walking through waist-deep water. There are 6 main modules. Hab 1 through Hab 3 contain living quarters, tiny compartments barely big enough for a bunk and a storage locker. Command and Operations occupies Hab 4, though most of the computer systems died years ago, and now it's just an oversized storage closet filled with equipment we can't repair. Life Support is Hab 5, the guts of the station, where the air processors and water reclaimers and waste converters keep us alive through a combination of obsolete technology and sheer stubbornness. Hab 6 is the agricultural module, 12 levels of hydroponic trays growing algae and mushrooms, and the sad, tasteless vegetables that comprise 90% of our diet. And then there's the hub, the central core where everything connects. That's where I am now, in the commissary space that doubles as our meeting area, recreation zone, and church for the handful of people who still pray. The hub has windows, real ones, not like the fake view screens in some of the modules. 4 circular ports, each about a meter across, made of layered polymer that's yellowed and scratched from decades of micrometeorite impacts and radiation exposure. Through them you can see Earth, always Earth, turning slowly beneath us in the same 97-minute cycle it's followed since before I was born. I used to spend hours staring down at it, trying to make out details through the haze coastlines, mountain ranges, the brown smear of what might be deserts or might just be irradiated wasteland. Sometimes you can see storms, massive spiral systems churning across the Pacific or the Atlantic. Sometimes there are dark patches that might be ash clouds or radiation fog. Mostly it just looks dead, brown and gray with occasional streaks of sickly green where something is still alive enough to photosynthesize. The adults who remember tell stories about what it used to look like. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. They talk about breathing air that smelled like grass or rain or ocean salt, about feeling actual wind on their skin, temperature that changed with the time of day and the seasons, about food that grew in dirt and tasted like something. I don't know if I believe them. It's hard to believe in a world that's different from this one. Sometimes I think they're making it up, or misremembering, or describing some pre-war propaganda film instead of reality. But then I'll see the way Dr. Okafor's face changes when she talks about her grandmother's garden in Nigeria, or how Mechanic Torres goes quiet when someone mentions the smell of desert rain, and I know they're telling the truth. They just can't quite make me understand it. David thinks we should have tried to go down years ago. He argues about it sometimes, late into the sleep cycle when we're supposed to be in our bunks, but instead we're sitting in the darkened commissary, sharing a pouch of hoarded coffee substitute and pretending we're not terrified of the silence. We could have retrofitted the return vehicle, he says. Not for the first time. Back when we still had machining capability, when the reactor was stable, we could have sent a scout team down, established contact, figured out what's survivable. With what landing coordinates? I ask. Also not for the first time. This is an old argument, comfortable in its repetition. Earth-based communications have been dead for 30 years. We don't know where the vaults are. We don't know what regions are even habitable, so we pick somewhere and hope. Better than dying up here. Is it? He doesn't answer that. Neither of us knows if it is. The return vehicle sits in the docking bay at the end of Hab 2, a bulky cone-shaped thing that was supposed to carry 20 people back to the surface in a controlled descent. It hasn't been powered up in my lifetime. The heat shielding is degraded. The landing thrusters require fuel we exhausted 8 years ago, trying to keep the station in a stable orbit. The guidance computer runs on software nobody alive knows how to program. It's not a vehicle anymore. It's a coffin we haven't gotten around to burying. Yuki is the only one who still goes into the docking bay. She sits in the pilot's seat sometimes, hands on the dead controls, staring through the forward viewport at nothing. I asked her once what she was doing and she said she was practicing. For what? I didn't ask. We both knew there was nothing left to practice for. The population has been declining for as long as I can remember. We started with 237 people when I was born, that's what the census log says, anyway, handwritten in Chief Dalton's precise block letters. 237 souls, a mix of original Vault-Tec crew and the civilians they'd grabbed during the emergency evacuation, plus the children born in those first desperate years when people still thought procreation was a viable option. Now we're down to 81. I checked the count this morning after Jenkins from engineering didn't show up for shift rotation. Found him in his quarters, same as Lisa and Thomas. Pills from the medical locker. Nobody keeps track of the pills anymore. Dr. Okafor stopped inventorying them after the third suicide, said she wasn't going to be complicit in rationing people's choice to leave. 81 people spread across 6 habitation modules designed for 200. You can go hours without seeing another soul if you stay in the less populated sections. Some people prefer it that way now. Commander Williams, he took over after Chief Dalton. Though nobody really acknowledges his authority anymore, he barely leaves Hab 4. Just stays in his quarters reviewing old mission logs like they'll reveal some answer we all missed. The children are the hardest absence to adjust to. There haven't been any new births in 9 years. The last baby was Maria Soto's daughter, Anna, born premature and struggling, dying after 6 weeks despite everything Dr. Okafor tried. After that, people stopped trying. Some of the women got sterilization procedures from the medic. Others just avoided each other, retreated into celibacy like it was a form of mercy. I can't blame them. What kind of life would you be giving a child up here? Another mouth to feed from shrinking rations, another set of lungs pulling from recyclers that clog more frequently every year, another consciousness trapped in this rotating cage with no future and no hope. Better not to start something you can't finish. The work continues though, because what else is there? We maintain the systems that keep us alive, even though we all know it's temporary. Even though we can see the long arc of our decline in every broken component we can't replace, every meal that's a little smaller than the last, every person who doesn't wake up or chooses not to. My assignment is agricultural support, which means I spend 6 hours a day in Hab 6 tending the hydroponic arrays. It's quiet work, methodical. You check pH levels in the nutrient solution, adjust the lighting timers, harvest the mature algae cultures, and seed new trays. The algae grows in thick green-brown mats under full-spectrum lamps, smells like pond water and copper. We process it into protein paste, mix it with mushroom fiber and synthesized vitamins to create something approximately edible. I've never tasted anything else. The adults talk about meat, about fruit, about bread made from wheat instead of algae starch. To me, it's just words. The paste is food. Food is paste. That's the entire equation. Chen works in life support, monitoring the air processors and water reclaimers. He's been training under Chief Engineer Ramos for 3 years, learning the systems that keep our atmosphere breathable and our water drinkable. It's grim work. The machinery is older than anyone alive, designed for a nominal 20-year operational lifespan that we've exceeded by over a decade. Parts fail constantly. Seals deteriorate. Filtration membranes clog with buildup that has to be manually cleaned because the automatic backflushing systems don't function anymore. We're losing efficiency, Chen told me last week. We were sitting in the commissary after shift, sharing a meal of mushroom cakes and reconstituted protein paste. His hands were stained black from the carbon filters he'd been replacing. The primary scrubbers are at 60% capacity, maybe less. Ramos thinks we have another 2 years before CO2 buildup becomes critical. Can you repair them? Repair them with what? We've already cannibalized the backup units. There's nothing left to scavenge. I'd pushed the paste around on my tray, suddenly not hungry. 2 years. Maybe less. We didn't talk about it after that. What was there to say? The math was simple. The air would become unbreathable before we starved, before the reactor failed, before any of the other slow catastrophes that were stalking us. We'd suffocate in our sleep, carbon dioxide levels rising gradually until unconsciousness came as a mercy. 2 years, maybe less. David works in maintenance, which mostly means crawling through access tunnels and flex tubes, repairing minor breaches and patching leaks. The station's hull is compromised in dozens of places: micrometeorite impacts, material fatigue, welds that have failed after decades of thermal cycling. We've gotten good at emergency patches, slapping sealant and structural tape over cracks and hoping it holds. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you hear a whistling sound in the walls and you know somewhere, slowly, our atmosphere is bleeding out into vacuum. He came back from a repair shift last month with a gash across his forearm, blood soaking through his sleeve. I helped him to medical, where Dr. Okafor stitched it closed with thread we'd sterilized and reused so many times it was starting to fray. "What happened?" I asked while she worked. "Sharp edge in the crawl space. Caught me when I was squeezing through. You need to be more careful." He'd laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Why? What am I being careful for?" Dr. Okafor hadn't looked up from her stitching. Her hands were steady, practiced. She'd sutured hundreds of wounds over the years: accidents, fights, the self-inflicted injuries that came in waves whenever someone else chose the pills. "You're being careful," she said quietly, "because pain still hurts, because infection still kills, because we're not dead yet." "Not yet," David agreed. "Just eventually." Eventually is everyone's problem, not just ours. But that wasn't true, and we all knew it. Eventually for people on the surface meant old age, disease, accident. Eventually for us meant suffocation or starvation, or the slow radiation poisoning that was probably already working through our cells. Eventually meant we'd taken ourselves out of the equation, removed ourselves from humanity's future, locked ourselves in orbit above a world we'd never touch. We were living in a mausoleum. We just hadn't finished dying yet. Yuki is the closest thing we have to an optimist, which isn't saying much. She works in command and operations, maintaining the communication arrays, even though there's nobody left to communicate with. Every day she powers up the receivers, scans the standard Vault-Tec frequencies, listens to static and silence. Every day she logs the results in the communication records with the same notation: no contact. I asked her once why she bothered. "Because the day I stop is the day we admit there's nobody down there," she said. "And I'm not ready to admit that." "You think someone's still broadcasting?" "I think if they are, we should be listening." She's logged 3 years of negative results, 3 years of static, but every morning she's back at the console, headphones on, running through the frequency bands with mechanical precision, hoping for something. Anything. A voice. A carrier signal. Proof that we're not the last humans left alive. I don't have the heart to tell her we probably are. The station follows a rhythm that doesn't care about hope or despair. Every 97 minutes we complete an orbit, dawn to dawn again, in perpetual cycle. You learn to mark time by it. Morning shift runs through 2 orbits, afternoon shift another 2. Sleep cycle takes 4, though nobody really sleeps that whole time. Mostly you lie in your bunk, staring at the curved ceiling, listening to the hum that might stop any moment, wondering if you'll wake up or if someone will find you cold and still and add another line to the death log. The log is kept in the hub, clipped to a bulkhead near the main access corridor. It started as a formal record: full names, dates of birth and death, cause when known. Chief Dalton's handwriting, neat and precise. But as the deaths accumulated and the record keepers changed, it became more abbreviated. Just names and dates now, sometimes not even that. Just a hash mark, a tally of lives concluded. I counted them this morning, 156 marks since the log started, 156 people who started this journey and didn't finish, didn't survive forward, just stopped. My mother's mark is near the middle of the second page. Angela Chen. No date of birth listed, just the date she died, 2099, when I was 15. She'd been working in Hab 6, tending the hydroponic arrays same as I do now. Collapsed between the trays, probably a stroke or aneurysm. Dr. Okafor said it was quick, painless. But I don't know if that was true or just something you tell a kid who just lost his only parent. I don't remember her clearly anymore, just fragments. The way she'd hum while working, tuneless sounds that got lost in the ventilator noise, the hardness of her hands from years of manual labor. The way she never cried where I could see her, but I'd hear it through the partition wall late in the sleep cycle, muffled sobs that she thought I couldn't detect. She never talked about my father. I knew he'd been one of the original crew, that he'd died before I was born during a reactor maintenance accident. She showed me his name in the log once, Marcus Torres, and that was all. I tried to imagine what he'd looked like, whether I had his eyes or his hands or his tendency to bite my lower lip when concentrating. But there were no pictures, no videos, nothing but a name and a mark. We don't preserve much up here. Memory is too expensive. The worst part isn't the dying, it's the watching. You see people deteriorate in slow motion, bones becoming brittle from calcium loss, muscles atrophying despite the exercise requirements, skin taking on that gray pallor that comes from recycled air and vitamin D deficiency. You see them make mistakes they wouldn't have made a year ago, forgetting procedures or miscalculating ratios or just standing motionless in corridors staring at nothing. Dr. Okafor calls it psychological decompression, the slow erosion of mental resilience under constant stress. She's documented it carefully, filling journals with observations about depression rates and cognitive decline, and what she calls existential fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from knowing you're trapped in a situation without solution. She showed me her notes once. I think she needed someone to know they existed, that her work meant something even if it would never be published or peer-reviewed or contribute to any broader understanding. Just pages and pages of careful notation about how humans fall apart when you take away their future. "We're not built for this," she said, sitting across from me in medical with her journals spread between us. "We need purpose, progress, the sense that tomorrow will be different from today, that we're moving towards something. Without that, we just stop." "Is that what you're doing?" I asked. "Stopping?" She'd smiled, sad and exhausted. "I stopped years ago, Jonas. I just haven't fallen over yet. Medical is running out of supplies. Obvious things first: antibiotics, painkillers, the drugs that kept chronic conditions manageable, but also the basics: bandages, surgical thread, antiseptic. Dr. Okafor makes do with sterilization and reuse, autoclaving instruments until they're brittle, washing and reusing gauze until it's more whole than fabric. She can still handle minor injuries, basic illness, but anything serious is a death sentence now. Appendicitis would kill you. A serious infection would kill you. Even something like a badly broken bone might be fatal if it didn't set properly and you developed complications. We've stopped taking risks because of it. No more external repairs unless absolutely critical. No more experimental repairs on systems we don't fully understand. No more anything that might result in injury we can't treat. We've made ourselves smaller, more cautious, less alive. I think that's the real victory of this place. It doesn't kill you with catastrophe or violence. It kills you with erosion, with the steady diminishment of possibility until you're just a maintenance function, keeping systems running out of habit rather than hope. The reactor is the last system that really matters. Everything else, food, water, air, depends on the power it generates. If it fails, we don't suffocate slowly over weeks. We freeze in minutes once the environmental systems shut down. Or maybe the radiation shielding fails and we cook from the inside out. Either way, it's faster than starvation. Chief Engineer Ramos runs a skeleton crew in the reactor space. Just 3 people now: him, Chen, and a woman named Patricia who was part of the original engineering team. They work 8-hour shifts, monitoring coolant flow, adjusting control rods, patching leaks in the radiation shielding with material scavenged from less critical systems. The reactor isn't critical yet. That's what Ramos tells anyone who asks. Not critical, just degraded, suboptimal, operating outside nominal parameters. Translation: it's dying, same as everything else. I went down to engineering 2 days ago to deliver some components David had fabricated in the machine shop, Found Ramos sitting at his monitoring station, staring at readouts that flickered and jumped from electrical interference. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before: acceptance. The quiet recognition that you've done everything possible and it still wasn't enough. How long? I asked. Not what's wrong or can you fix it, just how long. 18 months, he said. Maybe 2 years if we run it cooler, reduce power output. But then we'll have to shut down sections to conserve, and people will freeze before the reactor fails anyway. Can't we scavenge parts from somewhere, jury-rigger repair? He'd shaken his head slowly. We've already scavenged everything that can be scavenged. The backup reactor was stripped years ago. The emergency power cells are dead. There's nothing left to take. I'd set the components down on his workbench, careful not to disturb the tools and schematics spread across it. So we're just waiting. We've always been waiting, Jonas. We just didn't want to admit what we were waiting for. I left him there, surrounded by machines he understood better than any person alive, watching them die anyway. That night I broke protocol and went to the observation deck. It's technically off-limits now the viewports are degraded enough that there's concern about microfractures leading to catastrophic decompression. But I needed to see Earth, needed to understand what we'd been orbiting all these years, what we'd sacrificed everything to stay away from. The planet turned beneath me in the familiar rhythm. Brown continents, grey oceans, swirls of atmosphere that might have been clouds or might have been ash. From up here it looked peaceful. Dead, but peaceful. Like something that had finished hurting a long time ago. I pressed my hand against the viewport, feeling the faint vibration of the station's rotation. The glass was cold. Everything up here was cold, had been getting colder for years as we reduced power draw to conserve the reactor. We wore layers now, bundled in jumpsuits and salvaged blankets, but the chill still seeped through. Metal and composite conduct heat away faster than you can generate it. Somewhere down there, people might be living. Vault dwellers emerging from their shelters, traders moving between settlements, communities rebuilding from the ashes, or maybe not. Maybe it was as dead as it looked. The vaults failed or sealed, everyone who'd survived the initial exchange succumbing to radiation or starvation, or the violence that always comes when civilization collapses. We'd never know. That was the hardest part. Not the dying, but the not knowing. We'd isolated ourselves so completely that we'd removed our own context. We were a footnote to a history we couldn't read, survivors of an apocalypse we couldn't confirm. I stayed at the viewport until the cold drove me back to quarters. Earth continued its rotation, indifferent to my watching. The community has fractured into loose groups over the years. There's no formal organization anymore, no chain of command or structured society. Just clusters of people who still find meaning in different activities. The engineers keep the systems running because that's what engineers do. The agricultural workers tend the hydroponics because people need to eat. Medical continues providing care because Dr. Okafor can't help herself, and the rest just exist. Filling time between waking and sleeping, between meals, between heartbeats. Some people have retreated into private religions. There's a woman named Sarah who holds prayer services in one of the empty HAB modules, leading devotions to a God who either abandoned us or never existed. Maybe a dozen people attend, seeking comfort in ritual and scripture. I went once, curious. She was reading from a water-damaged Bible, her voice steady and sure, talking about faith and redemption and the valley of the shadow of death. I couldn't make myself stay. It felt like pretending, and I was too tired to pretend. Others have created their own meaning. There's a man named Liu who's been painting murals on the bulkheads throughout the station landscapes he remembers from Earth, scenes of forests and oceans and sunsets. They're crude, done with salvaged paint and improvised brushes, but they bring color to the gray metal walls. Proof that beauty still matters, even here. David started writing poetry. Bad poetry, he'll admit freely, but poetry nonetheless. He reads it sometimes in the commissary during evening meal, standing in the center of the room with a crumpled piece of paper, speaking words about loss and distance and the weight of empty sky. People listen, or pretend to listen, because it's better than silence. Yuki keeps her communication logs, her daily record of absence. Chen maintains the life support systems with religious precision. I tend the algae and mushrooms, watching them grow in their mindless biological imperative, envying their simplicity. We've all found our ways of coping, our ways of not looking at the calendar, at the dwindling rations, at the growing list of dead. There was a fight last week, rare enough to be noteworthy. A man named Stevens accused another man named Park of taking extra rations from the commissary stores. Park denied it. Stevens insisted. It escalated, voices rising in the confined space, and then Stevens threw a punch. They grappled in the low gravity, clumsy and ineffective, until David and Chen pulled them apart. Blood from Stevens' split lip floated in small spheres before surface tension pulled it toward the deck. Park had a bruise spreading across his cheek. Both were breathing hard, staring at each other with something that might have been hatred or might have been just desperate frustration seeking a target. "There's no extra rations," Dr. Okafor said into the silence. She'd been sitting at one of the tables, watching. "Supply Chief Ramos logs everything that comes in and goes out. If someone's taking extra, we'd know." "Then where's the food going?" Stevens demanded. "Rations are getting smaller. I'm not imagining that." "You're not imagining it," she agreed. "But that's not theft. That's reality. We're eating into reserves because agricultural output is declining. The algae cultures are contaminated. The mushroom yields are down 30% from last year. So yes, rations are smaller. They'll keep getting smaller until there's nothing left to ration." Stevens had looked at her, then at Park, then at the rest of us, watching from our tables. The anger drained out of him, replaced by something worse. Resignation. "I'm sorry," he muttered to Park. I'm hungry all the time now." "We're all hungry," Park said. And that was the end of it. But I understood what had really happened. Stevens wasn't angry about rations. He was angry about dying slowly, about watching his body consume itself from inadequate nutrition, about knowing that every meal was a countdown toward the last meal. Park was just convenient, a target for rage that had nowhere productive to go. We're all angry, underneath. We just don't have the energy to express it anymore. The contamination Dr. Okafor mentioned is getting worse. Something in the algae cultures, a bacterial infection or maybe just accumulated toxins in the nutrient solution, is killing off our primary food source. We've tried treating it with what chemicals we have left, isolating healthy strains, starting fresh cultures from preserved samples. Nothing works. The contamination comes back within weeks, spreading through the trays in green-brown waves of decay. Our agricultural output has dropped 40% in the last 6 months. Rations are down to 1 meal per day, supplemented by whatever mushrooms we can harvest and the dwindling stores of preserved protein paste. People are losing weight, moving more slowly, sleeping longer. Starvation takes time, especially when you're barely moving in low gravity. But it's visible now, ribs showing through jumpsuits, faces becoming gaunt, eyes sinking into skulls. We're wasting away in orbit above a dead planet, and there's nothing to be done about it. I've started keeping my own journal, not observations like Dr. Okafor's clinical notes or Yuki's communication logs, just thoughts. Memories, things I want to have written down before I forget them or before I'm not around to remember. I wrote about my mother yesterday, trying to capture what I remember, the humming, the hard hands, the crying through walls, trying to understand what she must have felt, giving birth up here, knowing her child would never see Earth, never feel wind or taste real food, or have any life beyond this rotating cage. She chose to have me anyway. That seems important somehow. Despite knowing the future, despite understanding the trajectory we were on, she chose to create another life. Maybe she thought things would get better. Maybe she believed in the mission, in the eventual return. Or maybe she just needed something to love in a place that offered so little worth loving. I wish I could ask her. I wrote about the others too. Chen and his quiet competence in the reactor space, David and his bad poetry, Yuki at her communication console, listening to silence and logging it faithfully, Dr. Okafor with her journals full of observations about our collective decline. We're all documenting the end in our own ways, creating records that nobody will ever read, leaving evidence that we existed, even though there won't be anyone left to find it. The station will outlast us, that's the irony. The structure itself is sound enough to orbit for decades more, maybe centuries. Long after we're gone, it'll still be up here, rotating faithfully, a tomb full of frozen bodies and scattered possessions. Maybe someday someone will find it. Salvage crews from restored civilization, or aliens investigating dead worlds, or just automated systems cataloging debris. They'll find our bodies, our journals, our hopeless attempts to maintain systems that were always failing. And maybe they'll understand what we tried to do here, or maybe they won't care. History doesn't remember everyone. I'm writing this 3 days after the Section C air handler died. Engineering hasn't fixed it yet. Probably won't fix it. We've moved everyone from those quarters into the other HAB modules, cramming people into spaces already occupied, sharing bunks and storage lockers, and trying not to think about what it means that we're consolidating. Consolidating is what you do when you're contracting. When your population is shrinking and your territory is decreasing, and you're pulling back to defensible positions for a last stand. Except there's no enemy to stand against. Just entropy. Just the slow heat death of our little isolated system. Chen says the CO2 scrubbers have maybe 18 months left. Ramos says the reactor has maybe 2 years. The agricultural contamination will probably starve us before either of those deadlines, unless we figure out how to treat it with resources we don't have. I'm not sure which end I'm hoping for. Quick seems merciful. The reactor fails. We freeze. It's over. But slow means more time. More days of watching Earth turn. More conversations in the commissary. More bad poetry and prayer services and painted murals. More life, even if it's diminished. I don't know if that's worth it. David asked me yesterday if I was afraid of dying. We were in the hub, floating more than walking in a section where the spin gravity barely registers. Earth visible through the scratched viewport, close enough to touch if there wasn't vacuum and 400 kilometers between us. I don't think so, I said after thinking about it. I'm more afraid of the waiting, of knowing it's coming and not being able to do anything about it. That's what dying is, though. Just waiting for the moment when you stop. Maybe. But down there, I gestured at the viewport. At Earth, people die without seeing it coming. Accident, violence, sudden illness. They get to live right up until they don't. We've been dying for years. We're just taking our time about it. He was quiet for a while, staring at the planet. Then, do you think anyone's still alive down there? Probably. Vaults are tough. Some of them must have made it. But you don't know. No, I don't know. We could have found out, if we'd gone down when we had the chance. I didn't argue. He was right. 20 years ago, maybe even 10, we could have attempted a descent. The return vehicle was functional. The reactor was stronger. We had fuel and supplies and people with the expertise to attempt it. But we didn't. We waited for conditions to improve, for radiation to decrease, for some signal from below that it was safe. We waited until waiting became the only option, until the return vehicle degraded and the fuel expired and the expertise died off one by one. We chose certainty over risk. Slow death in orbit over the possibility of quick death on descent. I'm not sure we chose wrong, just differently. The prayer services have gotten more frequent. Sarah holds them twice a day now, and attendance has grown. People seeking comfort in the familiar rituals, in the promise of something after this. I don't begrudge them that. We all need something to hold on to. I find my comfort in the hydroponics bay, in the simple biology of algae growing under full-spectrum lamps, in the careful chemistry of nutrient solutions and pH balance. It's concrete, measurable. You adjust the inputs and get predictable outputs, at least until contamination ruins everything. There's peace in that kind of work. In problems that can be solved, even temporarily. I've been teaching Yuki the basics. She needs something to do besides monitor dead frequencies, and agricultural work is meditative if you let it be. She's taken to it well, her hands gentle with the delicate root structures, her attention careful on the pH meters and growth charts. We don't talk much while we work, just exist in parallel, tending life in a place designed for death. Yesterday she found a sick tray algae turning yellow-brown, the contamination spreading, and instead of logging it for disposal like protocol demands, she spent 3 hours trying to save it. Isolating the healthy portions, treating the nutrient solution, adjusting the lighting spectrum. It died anyway. But I understood why she tried. The population is down to 74 now, 7 more gone in the last month, 3 suicides, 2 from illness Dr. Okafor couldn't treat. 1 from an accident in the machine shop, a fabrication press, malfunctioned and crushed a man's hand, and the injury got infected, and without proper antibiotics the infection spread. They die and we log them and we consolidate further. Moving bodies to the cargo hold where we've been stacking them, frozen in the unheated sections because we don't have fuel to cremate them and nowhere to bury them, and vacuum burial seems wrong somehow. We're building a morgue in orbit, a monument to miscalculation. Commander Williams made an announcement last week, called everyone to the hub, stood at the center of the commissary like he was still in charge of something, and told us we needed to come together as a community and support each other through these challenging times. Nobody said anything, just watched him deliver his speech to a room of gaunt faces and hollow eyes. He's been saying versions of the same thing for years. Platitudes about perseverance and community and maintaining hope. I think he means it. I think he genuinely believes that positive thinking will somehow counteract the material reality of our situation. Or maybe he just needs to believe that his leadership matters, that he's guiding us towards something instead of presiding over our dissolution. After he finished, people drifted back to their quarters or their work assignments without comment. What was there to say? We're doing what we can with what we have. Coming together doesn't create food, or fix the reactor, or clean the air scrubbers. It just makes us feel slightly less alone while we fail. I've stopped tracking the orbits. Used to count them obsessively 97 minutes per cycle, 14.8 cycles per day, 5,400 cycles per year. Marking time by Earth's rotation, by the cycle of light and shadow, by the rhythm of our endless fall around a planet we'll never reach. But what's the point? Time passes whether you count it or not. And knowing exactly how many orbits you've survived doesn't change how many you have left. I work, I sleep, I eat when there's food. I exist in the spaces between disasters, waiting for the next component to fail, the next person to disappear, the next ration reduction. This is what life has become. Maintenance and waiting, tending systems that are dying anyway, preserving a population that's already gone. Chen told me something yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. We were in life support, running diagnostics on the air processors, and he said, "You know what bothers me most? It's not that we're going to die. It's that we never really lived." I asked what he meant. We've been in holding pattern since before we were born, waiting for conditions to improve, waiting for the all-clear signal, waiting for permission to start our actual lives. And now we're going to run out of time before we ever got started. He was right. We've been in stasis, psychologically, if not physically, treating this as temporary even as it became permanent. Refusing to accept that this is our life, not a prelude to life, not a transition period, but the entirety of our existence. We were born in a waiting room and we'll die in a waiting room, and the appointment we were waiting for got cancelled before we arrived. I thought about that while tending the hydroponics today, thought about all the things I'll never experience: real gravity, natural light, food that tastes like food, wind, rain, the smell of growing things in actual dirt, sex, probably. There are so few of us left, and we're so tired, and the idea of creating new life up here feels obscene. Like condemning another consciousness to this slow suffocation. We've neutered ourselves, removed reproduction from our future because we can't bear to pass on this inheritance. The species ends with us, or at least our branch of it. Maybe that's appropriate. Dr. Okafor is failing. I can see it in the way she moves slower, more careful, like her body is made of glass. She still maintains her journals, still provides what medical care she can, but the light in her eyes has changed, dimmed. She knows things the rest of us don't. Medical knowledge we don't have access to. She can see our deterioration in clinical terms, can measure the declining function of our organs and systems, can predict with reasonable accuracy when each of us will fail. I wonder if that makes it easier or harder. Knowing. Having the data instead of just the dread. I asked her once if she wished she'd stayed on Earth, if she regretted the evacuation, the launch, the decision to orbit instead of taking chances with the vaults. Every day, she said without hesitation. But I also know I'd probably be dead if I'd stayed. So I regret surviving. Which seems ungrateful, but there it is. Would you rather have died quickly? I'd rather have lived. Quick or slow, we're all dying anyway. But down there I might have lived first, had experiences, made choices that mattered. Up here I've just been mentioning the inevitable while pretending it's meaningful. She'd paused, then added, "Don't put that in your journal. Let me keep some dignity." I promised I wouldn't. But I'm writing it now because I think it matters, because her honesty deserves to be recorded, even if nobody reads it. We're all pretending our documentation matters. Our logs and journals and careful records, like we're preserving something worth preserving. Maybe we are. Or maybe we're just filling time. The station is quieter now. Fewer people means fewer sounds, less conversation, less movement through the corridors, less evidence of occupation. You can walk from Hab 1 to Hab 6 and not see another soul. Just empty passages and sealed hatches and the ever-present hum of systems struggling to maintain themselves. It feels like a tomb already. We're just the ghosts who haven't realized we're dead. I found Liu's body yesterday. The man who painted murals, who brought color to grey walls. He'd hanged himself in the cargo bay, used cable from the electrical locker, positioned himself in front of his favorite painting, a sunset over an ocean he'd seen once as a child. I cut him down and reported it to Dr. Okafor. She logged it. We moved his body to the morgue section with the others. His murals remain, proof that he was here, that he tried to create beauty in a place that offered none. They're fading now, the improvised paint degrading, colors shifting and peeling. In a few years they'll be unrecognizable. In a few decades, gone entirely. But for now they're still here, still visible, still offering that small rebellion against the uniformity of our prison. I've started visiting them regularly, standing in front of crude landscapes and seascapes, trying to imagine what Liu saw when he painted them, trying to connect with a world I never knew through the memory of someone who's now gone. It's the closest I'll get to Earth. The rations are down to one meal every other day now. We're eating the reserves, the emergency stores that were supposed to last us through crisis periods. But what's the point of saving them? For what future emergency? We're already in the final emergency. This is it. People move more slowly now. Conservation of energy. We do our work assignments, but nothing extra. No recreational activities, no social gatherings, just the minimum necessary to keep critical systems running. Commander Williams tried to organize a community meal last week, pooling resources for one proper shared dinner. Almost nobody came. We took our portions back to our quarters and ate alone because pretending to be a community felt more exhausting than isolation. He sat at the commissary table by himself, plate in front of him, and I think that's when he finally understood we're not a community anymore. We're a collection of individuals running out their personal countdowns in proximity to each other. The social contract has dissolved. There's nothing left to bind us except geography. Chen hasn't been sleeping. I can hear him through the partition wall, pacing in his quarters during sleep cycle, muttering to himself. Sometimes he goes down to engineering and works double shifts, triple shifts, refusing to leave the reactor space like his vigilance alone can keep it functioning. I think he's trying to outwork the inevitable, to prove through sheer effort that he deserves to survive, that his competence and dedication will somehow matter. But the reactor doesn't care about dedication. It's going to fail because machines fail, because entropy always wins, because nothing lasts forever no matter how carefully you maintain it. I wish I could tell him it's okay to rest, that he's done enough, but who am I to say what's enough? Yuki stopped monitoring the communication channels. I noticed 3 days ago when I went to the hub and saw the console powered down, the headphones sitting silent on the workstation. I found her in Hab 3, sitting in an empty compartment, staring at the bulkhead. "You stopped listening," I said. "There's nobody there," she replied. "There never was. I was just pretending. Pretending helped. Pretending is exhausting." I sat down beside her, our shoulders touching in the cramped space. We didn't talk, just existed together in shared silence, listening to the hum of the station, feeling the faint vibration of rotation. After a while, she said, "I'm glad I knew you." "We're not dead yet," I said. "No, but we're getting close." She was right. We could feel it now. The end approaching not as sudden catastrophe but as gradual dimming. Systems failing, people failing, the whole enterprise winding down like a clock running out of spring tension. We've got weeks left, maybe months, not years. The air is getting stale. CO2 levels rising. The scrubbers can't keep up anymore. Chen works on them constantly, but there's only so much you can do with degraded components and no replacement parts. We're breathing each other's exhalations, a closed loop of recycled respiration getting progressively more toxic. You can feel it in your lungs, a tightness, a burning. Headaches that never quite go away. Fatigue that deepens every day. Dr. Okafor says we'll go unconscious before it gets too painful, carbon dioxide narcosis. Like falling asleep and not waking up. It sounds peaceful. Better than starvation. Better than freezing. Better than most ends. David stopped writing poetry. He gave me his notebook last week. Said he wanted me to have it. I asked why, and he said because I'd appreciate that someone tried to find words for this. I've been reading his poems. They're bad, like he said, clumsy meter, forced rhymes, obvious metaphors, but they're also honest. Raw expressions of fear and loss, and the desperate human need to mean something. There's one about Earth that I keep coming back to. We circle you like prayer beads, counting revolutions toward release. Brown and grey and green-sick. You turn beneath our endless falling, indifferent to our watching, while we learn that distance is just another word for dying slow. It's not good poetry, but it's true poetry. I think that's what matters. The population is down to 58. We've lost 16 people in the last 2 weeks. The pace is accelerating. Bodies failing faster as malnutrition and CO2 buildup and general systemic collapse compound each other. We've stopped moving bodies to the morgue section. Just leave them where they fall now. Seal the compartment. Move on. There aren't enough of us left to handle the dead with ceremony. Soon there won't be enough of us left to handle anything. I went to the observation deck yesterday. Final violation of safety protocols. Stood at the viewport, pressing my hands against the degraded polymer, staring down at Earth. It looked the same as always. Brown and grey and turning. Indifferent. I tried to feel something about it. Longing, anger, grief, any emotional connection to the planet that birthed my species, but there was nothing. Just a sphere of rock and water and poisoned atmosphere, no more meaningful than any other celestial body. We'd spent our entire lives orbiting it like it meant something, like proximity to home was the same as being home, but it was just geography, just the accident of where we ended up when the bombs fell. We might as well have been orbiting Mars or the asteroid belt or the empty void between stars. The location didn't matter. Only the isolation mattered. I'm one of the last ones still working. Most people have retreated to their quarters, conserving energy, waiting. But I still go to the hydroponics bay, still tend the algae cultures even though we've stopped harvesting them. The contamination has spread to every tray. Everything is dying or dead. But I go through the motions anyway, testing pH, adjusting lights, draining and refilling nutrient solutions. It's not about the algae anymore. It's about having something to do. Some routine that suggests normalcy, that pretends tomorrow will come and will matter. I know it won't, but I pretend anyway. Chen is in the reactor space constantly now. He's moved his bunk down there, eats his rations beside the monitoring station, sleeps in shifts listening to the machinery, watching readouts, making adjustments that buy us hours at a time. I visited him yesterday, found him staring at the control panel, face illuminated by warning lights that used to mean something urgent but now just mean everything is wrong. "It's going to fail," he said without looking at me. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. The coolant system is compromised, radiation shielding is degraded. I can keep it balanced for a while, but eventually something will cascade and that'll be it." "How long?" "Days, maybe a week if I don't sleep." "You should sleep." "What's the point? To be unconscious when it happens instead of awake. I'd rather see it coming." I understood. We all wanted to see it coming. To be conscious for our end instead of sliding into it unknowing. To witness our own conclusion. I left him there, surrounded by dying machinery, keeping vigil over our last functional system. Dr. Okafor is in medical, organizing her journals, stacking them neatly on the storage shelves, arranging them chronologically, creating order from the documentation of our disorder. She moves slowly now, each step deliberate. I don't think she's eating her rations, saving them for the others, though there aren't many others left to save them for. I asked if she needed help organizing. "No," she said. "This is mine to finish." "Will anyone read them?" "Probably not, but I wrote them anyway." She turned to look at me then, really look at me. Her eyes were sunken, her face gaunt, but there was still something sharp in her gaze, still something alive. "You're young," she said. "You should have had a real life." "This is my real life. It's the only one I got." "I know. That's what makes it tragic." We stood together in medical, surrounded by empty supply cabinets and organized journals, and for a moment I felt the full weight of what we'd lost. Not just our futures, but our pasts. The experiences we never had. The world we never knew. We were ghosts of unlived lives, shadows of people who might have existed if history had turned differently. But history didn't turn differently. It turned exactly as it turned, and here we are, the dead end of a dead branch of humanity, burning out quietly in orbit above a poisoned world. There are 41 people left alive. I know because I counted. Went through every HAB module, every compartment, checking for signs of occupation. 41 sets of lungs still pulling from the degrading atmosphere. 41 hearts still beating against entropy. We're scattered now, isolated in separate sections. No more communal meals or gatherings, just individuals in their separate cells, waiting. The hum has changed. It's gotten irregular, stuttering. The spin servos are failing, our rotation becoming uneven. Soon we'll lose even the pretense of gravity, floating in microgravity like the tomb we're becoming. I don't care anymore. Down or up or sideways, it's all the same when you're nowhere. I'm writing this in the commissary. The hub is dark now except for emergency lighting red LEDs that barely penetrate the shadows. The viewports show Earth turning below, same as always. I've been writing for hours, filling pages, getting it all down while I still can, while my hands still work and my mind still functions and there's enough oxygen to keep my brain alive. This is my testimony, my record. Proof that we were here, that we tried, that we existed for this brief moment before fading into the same oblivion that claimed everyone else. I don't know who will read this. Maybe nobody. Probably nobody. But I wrote it anyway. David is dead. Found him in his quarters this morning, lying in his bunk, notebook open on his chest. He'd written one final poem, or maybe just a final line. We die as we lived, falling forever, never landing. I closed the notebook and left him there. Yuki is unconscious. CO2 narcosis. She's breathing but not responsive. I sat with her for a while, held her hand, told her it was okay to let go. I don't know if she heard me. Chen is still in engineering, still at his post. The reactor is failing, but he's there, adjusting control rods, monitoring coolant flow, buying us hours we don't need. I think he'll stay there until it goes, until the whole system cascades and the reactor breaches and everything ends in radiation or cold. He's earned that, the right to die at his post, doing what he knew how to do. Dr. Okafor left medical yesterday, sealed the door, took her journals, walked to the cargo bay. I don't know what she did after that. I didn't follow. She deserved privacy for her end. Commander Williams is in Hab 4, still at his desk, still reviewing mission logs like they matter, still leading a command that no longer exists. I passed his compartment an hour ago and heard him speaking, delivering a report to nobody, explaining our status to empty air, maintaining protocol even as everything dissolves. I admire that, in a way. The commitment to structure, the refusal to abandon form even when function has ceased. We all find our ways of finishing. I'm one of the last now. Maybe 6 of us still conscious, still breathing, still aware. The air is thick, hard to pull into lungs. Every breath is work. I can feel the narcosis beginning, the drowsiness, the sense of everything becoming distant, abstract. It's not painful. Dr. Okafor was right about that. Just a gradual dimming, like falling asleep. I'm going to the observation deck now, going to spend these last hours watching Earth turn, watching the planet that killed us and that we never touched. I'm taking this journal with me, leaving it clipped to the viewport mount where maybe someone will find it someday. Maybe not. Either way, I need to have written it. I'm at the viewport now. Earth below, stars above, the station creaking around me, systems failing, rotation slowing. My hands are shaking, hard to write. But I want to finish this, want to get it all down. We came up here to survive, to wait out the apocalypse and return when it was safe. But there was never going to be a return. That was the truth we couldn't face. We launched into orbit, and we stayed in orbit, and we died in orbit, suspended between the world that ended and the future that never came. We were always going to end here. Maybe that's okay. Maybe there's dignity in lasting as long as we did, in maintaining hope long past the point of reason, in tending systems we knew were failing, in documenting our decline for an audience that doesn't exist. Maybe all of that meant something. Or maybe it was just what we did while waiting to stop. I can see lights on the surface, probably fires, or maybe settlements, or maybe just my oxygen-starved brain creating patterns from random photons. I like to think they're settlements, people rebuilding, communities forming from the ashes. I like to think humanity continued down there while we faded up here, that our isolation was the price of their survival. I can live with that, die with that. The narcosis is deepening, thoughts fragmenting. Hard to hold the pen. Earth is beautiful from up here. Even poisoned, even dead. Still beautiful. I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I was here.